What if one of the most recognized women on Earth, an actress turned duchess, had a secret so dark, so buried, that not even the royal family dared to speak it aloud? What if she wasn't just a former deal or no-deal briefcase girl or a suit star climbing her way through Hollywood, but something else entirely? What if the name Meghan Markle was quietly whispered in the same breath as Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and an island shrouded in silence, shame, and secrets? You feel that drop in your stomach? That's not just tabloid gossip. That's dread, because something huge just cracked open. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And now, her name is in the middle of it. The dam is breaking. And Meghan Markle? She's no longer untouchable. This isn't a fairy tale gone wrong. It's something much, much worse. Let's dive in. The footage, grainy, shaky, almost forgotten, was never meant to surface. Not after the NDAs, the sealed court documents, the buried testimonies. But it did. And with it came a face that sparked instant shockwaves across the globe. She wasn't center frame, but you knew who it was. Hair slicked back in a tight bun. Slim silhouette in a metallic mini dress. Wide eyes. Nervous smile. And unmistakably, Meghan Markle. No voice. No timestamp. No context. But the internet exploded anyway. Within hours, Meghan Markle Epstein Island was trending across platforms. At first, it seemed like an outrageous smear, one more conspiracy tossed into the digital bonfire. But then came the connections, the familiar names, the matching timelines, the eerie alignment of her early career years with known Epstein parties. Then the witness testimony, a sealed deposition from 2015, now unsealed. A woman's trembling voice under oath. They used her. She didn't know why she was really there. But she was young, beautiful. They told her it was networking. And suddenly, the narrative started to crack. Not just who Meghan is now, but who she might have been before. This isn't about fashion blogs, Spotify podcasts, or breakups with Buckingham. This is about power, manipulation, and a past that refuses to stay buried. Because here's the thing. Meghan's been trying to control her story for years. From bombshell interviews with Oprah, to Netflix documentaries that position her as the misunderstood outsider, to bold declarations of reclaiming her voice, her space, her truth. But the footage? The footage tells another story. And in that story, she isn't speaking. She's being used. And the tearful whisper, captured in what some claim is an unsealed voicemail, still haunts those who've heard it. They used me. Let that settle in. Not, I was part of it. Not, I made a mistake. They used me. Now ask yourself, who was she talking about? Epstein? Ghislaine? The handlers who brought her into that world? The royal family? Or all of the above? This isn't about judging Meghan. It's about finally confronting the truth that fame, true fame, the kind manufactured behind velvet curtains and elite corridors, is rarely earned clean. And if even she, the girl from LA who became a duchess, was just another pawn in the hands of monsters, what does that say about the system? But here's where things get even darker. Because this footage, it's just the beginning. Once it surfaced, it cracked open a nest of legal documents, sealed testimonies, and private investigators now coming forward. Some say they've been sitting on this material for years, afraid, threatened, blacklisted. Others say they've only now started to connect the dots. And one of the first dots? A name scrawled into the margins of a 2007 party guest list. M. Markle. Underlined. Next to it, TV girl. Canada. Biracial. Photogenic. Party material. Chilling. She wasn't Meghan the Duchess. She wasn't even Meghan from Suits yet. She was party material. And someone had made a note of that. Ask yourself, how does a woman go from being categorized like that to marrying into the British royal family? Coincidence? Or carefully curated redemption? Because the deeper we dig, the more it looks like Meghan wasn't just lucky. She was chosen. But chosen for what? And by whom? See, every fairy tale needs a princess. But not every princess gets to choose the castle. Sometimes, the castle chooses her. And sometimes, the dungeon is right beneath the throne. Don't forget, Meghan didn't just marry a prince. She married the spare, the one furthest from the spotlight. The one most rebellious, most vulnerable, most likely to protect someone with a painful past. Now consider this. Was Harry the rescue? Or the cover? Let's not forget the palace's own paranoia when Meghan arrived on the scene. Background checks, staff resignations, leaks, tabloid fury. Why? Because maybe, just maybe, someone in the royal machine already knew she had secrets, knew her name had circled through dangerous company, knew that if certain tapes ever surfaced, it wouldn't just ruin Meghan. It would stain the crown. Permanently. But for years, nothing happened. The footage stayed hidden. The testimonies stayed sealed. Meghan became a royal, then an exile, then an American brand. Until now. Until one video. One grainy, silent, explosive frame. One whispered quote. They used me. And suddenly, we're back where it all began. A beach house. An island. A young woman. A secret. A cover-up. So why now? Why is it all surfacing at this moment? And more importantly, who wants it to surface? Because make no mistake, someone released this for a reason. To destroy her? To warn her? To stop something bigger? Or to prepare the world for a reckoning decades in the making? That's what this investigation is about. Not just Meghan, but the system that put her there. That lifted her up, then spit her out. That turned a TV girl into a princess. And maybe a princess into something else entirely. Over the next 15 chapters, we're going to unravel every piece. The footage, the parties, the whispered names, the palace panic, the mysterious firings, the shadow men, the gatekeepers, and the final message no one expected to hear. But we begin where the world first saw her. In a dress far too expensive for an aspiring actress. On an island too exclusive for beginners. With a camera watching from behind a potted palm tree. And in the background, a man we weren't supposed to see again. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the truth slipped through the cracks on purpose? That's exactly what some are saying happened on that Tuesday morning in October, when an anonymous Reddit post titled Unsealed Epstein Vault Drop. High-res detonated across the internet like a digital grenade. No warning. No context. Just one zip file. And inside, one video. One grainy, low-resolution video that shouldn't have existed. Security footage. Blurred faces. Party lighting. Low voices. A handheld angle. But as the camera swept across a stone-tiled patio, filled with well-dressed silhouettes under torchlit shadows, someone paused the video. Someone enhanced. Someone zoomed. And someone whispered, "Is that Meghan Markle?" Let's be clear. This wasn't the usual deepfake nonsense. This wasn't AI-generated clickbait. This wasn't a Photoshop tabloid cover. This was raw, unpolished, archived. And the moment that blurry frame hit social media, the wildfire began. Within minutes, the video was ripped, mirrored, shared, watermarked, and scrutinized. Image experts from Discord communities to TikTok sleuths jumped in, dissecting facial features, timestamps, jewelry, fashion brands. And somehow, eerily, it matched. Not just the cheekbones, the earrings. The exact pair Meghan had once worn in a Suits promo shoot back in 2008. The dress? A silver blue Hervé Leger mini. Off the rack in 2006. Discontinued in 2009. The hair? Tight bun. No curls. Minimal makeup. Barely 27 years old. And the voice? Silent. Because in the footage, she didn't speak. She just followed. Followed a tall woman in black. Slender, sharp. Possibly Ghislaine. Then she stopped, turned slightly, and looked straight at the camera. Only for a moment. But it was unmistakable. The world froze. Could it really be her? Could the woman who walked behind Queen Elizabeth at royal engagements have once walked silently behind Ghislaine Maxwell on Epstein's island? The reactions were immediate and extreme. The hashtags surged. Hashtag Meghan on the island. Hashtag Epstein footage leak. Hashtag party favor Duchess. Pundits screamed, fake. Others screamed, finally. And royal insiders? Dead silent. But here's where it gets disturbing. Because the footage, according to metadata, was dated 2007. And Meghan Markle? She was supposedly filming Fringe in Toronto that summer. So how could she be in two places at once? Unless she wasn't filming that week. Unless that part of her life has been rewritten. And suddenly the timeline doesn't feel so airtight anymore, does it? But let's back up. Who released the footage? That's the first mystery. The Reddit user vanished within 30 minutes. Their entire account. Deleted. The zip file? Removed. The original upload site? Taken down. But by then it was too late. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do the victims, because a few days later, another leak surfaced. A sealed deposition from 2015, now unsealed by court order due to recent legal pressure from victims' groups demanding transparency. Inside the 89-page document was something unexpected, a single line buried in a sea of redactions. There was one girl they called the Hollywood One. The one they said was from that show. Suits, I think. Said she had no idea. She was just for show. They called her a party favor. Pause. Let that sink in. She was just for show. A party favor. Now look at that video again. Look at how Meghan stands. Look at how she follows. Look at how she tries not to look directly into the lens, but can't help herself. It's not glamour. It's not seduction. It's something else entirely. Is it confusion? Fear? Or the realization that she was being filmed, not as a guest, but as a product? And then silence. No mainstream outlet touches it. No royal spokesperson denies it. No legal action is taken. No response from Meghan's reps. Why? Is it all too ridiculous? Or is the silence calculated? Because behind the scenes, sources say things were very loud. Whispers of emergency meetings. Phone calls between PR teams, legal counsels, and, yes, senior royals. One palace aide reportedly told a London tabloid editor, "We've been expecting this for years. We just didn't know when it would come." That sentence is terrifying. Expecting? What exactly were they expecting? And why does it sound like someone already knew Meghan's past was a ticking time bomb? You see, the royals aren't just concerned with reputation. They're obsessed with optics. And this unsealed footage isn't a scandal. It's a weapon. Because in that frame, even if it's her for just 1 second, the questions explode like landmines. Was she trafficked? Was she lured? Was she complicit? Was she protected? Or worse, was she being watched? But here's the twist. The footage isn't new. It was reportedly discovered in 2019, 4 years ago, during the FBI raid on Epstein's New York townhouse. So why is it surfacing now? Why now, when Meghan is expanding her American Riviera Orchard brand? Why now, as Prince Harry makes mysterious solo trips to London? Why now, when Netflix is rumored to be backing out of a second Sussex documentary? Because someone wants this story out. Not hidden, not buried, exposed. But why? To destroy her? To force a confession? Or to send a message to the others? Because if Meghan, arguably the most famous woman to ever enter the Epstein whisper network, is now exposed, who's next? Which Hollywood star? Which royal? Which billionaire? The floodgates may have just opened. And Meghan? She's the first name on the list. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to trace this step by step. From the footage, to the context, to the guest list, to the black book, to the witness who said she didn't even know what she was there for. Because if that's true, if Meghan Markle really had no idea what she was being led into that night, then this isn't a scandal. It's a crime. And the question becomes, why didn't she ever speak about it? Why didn't she warn others? Why did she wait until she had a crown, a Netflix deal, and a PR empire? Unless she couldn't. Unless she wasn't allowed to. Unless someone told her to keep quiet. Until now. Because if her whispered quote is real, "They used me," then everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle was a performance, a mask, a cover. And this video is the first crack. Because what's buried in the next frame might just show us who else was there. And once we know that, nothing will ever be the same again. What if everything you think you know about Meghan Markle, every headline, every glamorous photo, every carefully sculpted story, was only a mask, a glossy cover on a much darker book? Because before she was the Duchess of Sussex, before Oprah and Netflix and castles and coronations, Meghan Markle was just Meghan. But even that's not quite true, is it? Because long before the world ever heard her name, Meghan was already navigating a world built on illusion. A world where fame could be rented, status could be faked, and beauty could be weaponized. A world that, according to some, led her right into the orbit of people like Jeffrey Epstein. So who was she? Who was Meghan before the royals, before Harry, before the glam squads and political panels? Let's go back. Not to Buckingham. To Los Angeles. To a middle-class neighborhood where a biracial girl with big ambitions walked a line between two worlds. Meghan Rachel Markle. Born 1981. Mixed race. daughter of a Hollywood lighting director and a social worker. Bright, outspoken, charismatic, but always watching. She attended private Catholic schools, even though she wasn't Catholic. Why? Some say it was to protect her from the public school system. Others say it was about proximity, getting her into wealthier social circles early on. Because that's what Meghan learned fast in life. It's not about where you come from. It's about who you stand next to. As a teenager, she'd often be seen hanging out in upscale parts of town, walking through boutiques she couldn't afford, sitting at cafes and acting the part. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. She wasn't pretending to be rich. She was practicing for a future she was already scripting. She went on to study theater and international relations at Northwestern University, an unusual combination. One foot in drama, one in diplomacy, almost as if she knew she might need both. But let's fast forward a bit. Graduation, 2003. Hollywood was waiting. Except it wasn't. Meghan, like so many others, entered a world of constant rejection. Casting directors told her she was too ethnic. Then others said she wasn't ethnic enough. She was ambiguous. A casting nightmare. So how did she survive? How did a young woman with no A-list agent, no powerful backers, and no connections manage to rise from soap opera walk-ons to global superstardom? Let's pause right there. Because here's where the story gets fuzzy, or maybe deliberately blurred. Around 2006, Meghan began working briefcase gigs on Deal or No Deal. Not exactly acting, but on TV. And according to multiple sources, some of whom have since been scrubbed from interviews, she started appearing at high-end social events. Not public events. Private ones. Yacht parties. Hotel lounges. Billionaire fundraisers. One ex-producer from a Canadian film project claimed, anonymously, that Meghan had a knack for getting into rooms she wasn't invited to, but once she was in, no one wanted to ask her to leave. Sounds clever, right? Resourceful? But here's where it takes a turn. In 2007, Meghan was seen frequently at Soho House events. Before she ever officially became a member, she mingled with celebrities, foreign investors, moguls. Always perfectly styled. Always solo, but never out of place. And according to one now-deleted blog post by a fashion intern, Meghan once bragged about having a guy who opens the right doors. Who was that guy? Some say it was Marcus Anderson, the same man who would eventually introduce her to Prince Harry. Others believe it was someone much older, much more powerful, a man whose name, according to recent unsealed court documents, also appeared in Epstein's infamous Black Book. Coincidence? Or design? Because here's where it gets chilling. One of the most persistent rumors about Meghan's early career is that she participated in so-called social influencer yacht circuits, an underground world where aspiring actresses, models, and socialites were flown to exclusive parties to entertain powerful men. Not sex work, not directly, but a transactional game, nonetheless. Appearances, charm, companionship. In exchange, connections, exposure, opportunities, and sometimes silence. Meghan has never confirmed this. Of course she hasn't. But traces of that life keep surfacing in the form of photos, old blog entries, and deleted Instagram posts. In one archived image from 2007, Meghan poses on a yacht in Ibiza with several unidentified women and a man who bears a striking resemblance to a known Epstein associate. Is it damning? No. Is it concerning? Very. Because that was the same summer now linked to the island video. So what was Meghan doing that year? Filming? Or networking? Now, to be fair, Meghan was always ambitious. And ambition isn't a crime. But what if that ambition made her vulnerable? What if someone offered her a shortcut? A flight? A party? A chance to meet the right people? And what if she said yes, not knowing what the price would be? And here's where it becomes even more haunting. Years later, after she was already a royal, Meghan told an interviewer, "I didn't know what I didn't know. And by the time I figured it out, it was too late." At the time, people assumed she was talking about the monarchy. But what if she wasn't? What if she was talking about before? What if that sentence was a veiled confession about something she'd never dared to say out loud? Because the deeper we dig, the more contradictions emerge. Her resume, her timeline, the overlapping events that never quite match up. Why did she bounce between small roles for nearly a decade? Why was her lifestyle, travel, fashion, events so far beyond what she was being paid? Why were certain names always close to hers, even if she never mentioned them? One Hollywood manager, speaking anonymously, said, Meghan had something most young actresses don't. She had backing. You could tell. Not from studios. From people. People who don't have IMDb pages. That's a terrifying quote. Because in the world of Epstein, Ghislaine, and elite networks, the people without IMDb pages are the ones running everything. And if Meghan was brought into that world, even briefly, it would explain so much. The secrecy, the control, the silence. Because here's the final question. Did Meghan Markle willingly enter the machine? Or was she swallowed by it? Was she ambitious or trafficked? A mastermind or a mark? A climber or a pawn? Maybe it's both. Maybe that's the horror of it, that she thought she was rising, but was being used all along. Because when you hear the words, they used me, everything changes. It reframes the fairy tale. It reframes the marriage. It reframes her entire life. And if Meghan was used, who used her? Who put her on that island? Who erased the photos? Who edited the timelines? Who helped her rise, only to watch her fall? Who gave her the crown, just to take it away? Because what comes next will blow the whole story open. What if your name, your full legal name, was printed in a leather-bound book alongside presidents, princes, and predators? And what if that book wasn't fiction? Let's talk about the book. Not a journal, not a planner, not a contact list you'd find on someone's phone. No, we're talking about Epstein's Black Book, the most infamous little black book in modern history. A sinister directory of the rich, the royal, and the ruthless. Discovered by authorities during an early investigation, this chilling Rolodex contained over 1,000 names, each one handwritten, some just phone numbers. Others, full addresses, email aliases, secondary numbers, hidden extensions. And nestled between world leaders, models, and billionaires were stars, actors, publicists, beauty queens, rising names. But what matters most? The ones no one ever expected to see there. And now, one more name has reportedly surfaced. Markle. Meghan. That's right. The Duchess of Sussex. The girl who married into royalty. The humanitarian. The podcast host. The mother of two. The same Meghan who now, according to investigative leaks and an alleged 2023 supplemental release of Epstein materials, may have been quietly added, buried in a mid-2000s entry next to the words. TV actress, Suits, Canada. Photogenic. Potential. Let that line haunt you. Potential. As if she were a project. A file. Not a person. So how did her name allegedly end up in that book? And why now? Let's break it down. First, the book itself. Originally leaked to Gawker and later published in full by several outlets, Epstein's Black Book was first recovered in the early 2000s by Palm Beach police. It was intended to be evidence. A paper trail. Proof of who Epstein communicated with, who he invited, who he gave access to, or demanded favors from. But the version made public? It wasn't the full story. Several pages were missing. Some entries were half redacted. And the most sensitive contacts? Vanished. Under court seal or bureaucratic error. For years, investigators suspected another book existed. A supplemental list. One that Epstein or Ghislaine kept separate, more hidden, more encrypted. And according to a leak from within the DOJ's investigation team, that second book, long thought to be lost, may have finally been decrypted. And with it, a new list of names. Names not on the first list. Names of people who weren't famous yet. People like Meghan Markle. Second, the connection timeline. Let's play detective. Meghan began acting in the early 2000s. In 2006, she was working Deal or No Deal. By 2007, she'd landed minor TV spots. And in 2011, Suits launched her into mid-tier celebrity status. So if Epstein's book refers to her as TV actress, Suits, Canada, then the note likely originated between 2007 and 2012. Exactly the time Meghan was frequenting LA's Soho House, popping up at luxury events, and, according to some, being mentored by powerful figures. Now here's where it gets strange. That same 5-year period was when Epstein expanded his reach into Canada. He made several unexplained trips to Toronto. He attended at least one fashion gala and invested in 2 Canadian tech startups. He even partnered with financiers who, later on, were linked to elite Hollywood circles. And guess what? At one of those Toronto events in 2009, Meghan Markle was photographed on the red carpet. She wasn't a guest speaker. She wasn't starring in any films. But there she was, smiling next to a fashion mogul later subpoenaed in the Maxwell trial. Coincidence? Or contact? And if her name was in that second black book, handwritten and logged with notes like photogenic potential, then we're looking at something far more calculated than chance. We're looking at recruitment. Third, the whistleblower. An anonymous source, allegedly a former assistant to one of Epstein's accountants, recently submitted testimony to a victims' advocacy legal team. Here's what they claimed. There was a second set of names. These were girls who hadn't popped yet, up-and-comers. The idea was to get close early, build rapport, introduce them to the network. Meghan was one of them. I remember her name because someone joked about her royal name long before she married the prince. Long before. Let that settle. Before Meghan ever dreamed of wearing a tiara, she was already nicknamed royal. Why? Was it just a joke? Or did someone decide her trajectory before she ever had a say? Because this testimony reframes everything. She wasn't randomly discovered by Prince Harry. She may have been positioned, tracked, monitored, advanced. And again, the question haunts us. Did Meghan know? Or was she being managed like a chess piece? Because in Epstein's circles, potential wasn't about acting. It wasn't about scripts or storylines. It was about value. Value to a network that thrived on silence, control, and manipulation. Fourth, digital shadows. In the wake of the leaked second book, digital forensics teams began combing through online archives, old emails, deleted social media, metadata. And they found something chilling. A 2008 calendar invite from an Epstein-connected email alias included a Meghan R. as a +1 guest for a New York social mixer at the Carlisle Hotel. Now, Meghan's middle name is Rachel. Her acting profile at the time was listed as Meghan R. Markle, and her Toronto address matched the IP that RSVP'd yes. But here's the twist. Meghan was never photographed at that event. No photos, no stories, no evidence she attended, or no evidence anyone wanted public. Because a +1 doesn't always mean party guest. Sometimes it means party favor. Fifth, the palace panic. Let's jump ahead. 2016, Meghan is introduced to Prince Harry. 2017, engagement. 2018, royal wedding. But something strange happens behind the scenes. At least 2 private investigators in London were hired, then let go, while vetting Meghan's background. One of them, who spoke anonymously to the Daily Mail, said this. We were told to look into her past. When we dug too deep, particularly into certain social circles from 2007 to 2010, we were told to stop. Shut down. Immediately. Why? What did they find? Or better yet, what were they about to find? Because if Meghan's name was in that second black book, if there were documents, photos, videos tying her to Epstein's network, willingly or not, then the British royal family had every reason to panic. Not just because of public optics, but because they'd already been burned. Remember Prince Andrew? His association with Epstein? His photo with Virginia Giuffre? His trainwreck BBC interview? That scandal nearly shattered the monarchy. They couldn't afford another. Especially not involving the first biracial royal bride in history. So if they found even a whiff of Meghan being linked to Epstein's circles, you better believe they'd bury it. Bury it deep. But now it's bubbling back up. The black book has resurfaced. The footage has leaked. And the whispers are turning into roars. Because Meghan Markle may not be the last name in the Epstein ledger, but she might be the first one to shatter the illusion. Not a prince. Not a president. Not a billionaire. A duchess. A woman who stood on a balcony in Buckingham Palace. And may have once stood on an island no one was supposed to survive. So what happens next? Do more names leak? Do more receipts drop? Will Meghan come forward? Or will the palace, the lawyers, and the billion-dollar machinery slam the vault shut again? One thing's certain. Her name was never supposed to be there. But now that it is, someone's scrambling to contain the damage. And just when we think it can't get worse, we stumble upon the party. The one where the video was taken. The one where she walked behind Ghislaine. The one no one ever talked about. Until now. What happens when a party isn't a party? When the champagne is flowing, the music is pulsing, the laughter is staged, But none of it's real. What if it's all a set? A stage? A trap? Because the night in question, the one that appears in the now infamous video, wasn't just another exclusive soiree among billionaires. It was something else entirely. And Meghan Markle? She wasn't just a guest. She was part of the show. Let's reconstruct the scene. From what we now know, thanks to leaked testimonies, unsealed travel logs, and eyewitness accounts, this particular gathering took place in the summer of 2007. Location: Epstein's private estate in Little St. James, the island in the Virgin Islands the press would later dub Pedophile Island. But on that night, it wasn't a crime scene. It was a glittering masquerade. Guests were flown in on private jets, some from New York, others from Canada, London, and Dubai. The manifest was tight. Names redacted. But one person who claimed to be working security at the time later described the guest list as a blend of royalty, Hollywood, and those you'd never recognize, but who control everything. The vibe? Intimate. Controlled. Like a dress rehearsal for something much bigger. And Meghan? She arrived late. Not by plane, but reportedly by yacht. Escorted by a woman believed to be Ghislaine Maxwell, wearing that silver-blue Hervé Leger dress. Minimal jewelry. Hair tied back. Not flashy. Not loud. But striking. Exactly the way Ghislaine liked them, according to multiple victim accounts. Not too famous. Not too loud. But ready. Presentable. Compliant. And when Meghan stepped off that boat, there was a camera waiting. That detail is important, because most of Epstein's events banned cameras. But not this one. Why? Because it wasn't about pleasure. It was about leverage. Blackmail. Control. And that's what changes everything. Inside the villa on Epstein's island wasn't huge. But it was strategically designed. Open terraces. Soft lights. Marble floors that echoed with every heel click. Each room had a theme: the library, the Zen room, the theater. And on that night, according to one staffer's later deposition, the main terrace was set up like a mock awards show. Red carpet, faux photographers, paparazzi-style flashbulbs. But no press. Only pretend press. Everyone played a role. Men in tuxedos. Women in cocktail dresses. Champagne flutes raised. Applause piped in through hidden speakers. A performance. And Meghan? She was led down that carpet. Alone. Applauded. Filmed. Not interviewed. Not spoken to. Just observed. A test. One that, according to the same deposition, she passed with stunning composure. Does that sound like a party? Or a ritual? The favor circuit. According to multiple Epstein survivors, parties like this were used to audition women. Not for movies. Not for modeling. But for something far more sinister. Influencer roles. Companion placements. Strategic relationships with powerful men. The term most commonly used? Party favor. And one victim, in now public court transcripts, recalled being told, "Don't worry, you're just here to smile and make everyone feel welcome. You're a favor. Nothing more. Just a favor. Disposable. Interchangeable." And Meghan? In the footage? That's exactly what she looked like. Not a guest. Not a star. A placement. She wasn't mingling. She was positioned. Standing where she was told. Laughing when prompted. Walking behind Ghislaine like a prop in a parade. Eyes darting. Smile tight. Shoulders tense. And for the briefest moment, she glances at the camera. She sees it. She knows. And yet, she keeps walking. Because in that world, when you're chosen to be a favor, you don't ask questions. You just show up. The silence in the room. So why has no one spoken about that party? Not the other guests. Not the staff. Not the men who allegedly sat in white linen chairs and watched the women be paraded like auction items. Because everyone there knew the rule. What happens on the island stays off the record. But one person broke ranks. A former chef. He didn't give his name, but he submitted a statement to a journalist before vanishing from the grid. In it, he described a woman in a silver dress who stood out because she looked like she didn't belong. Most of the girls knew the deal. Knew what to do, how to play. But this one, she seemed confused. Like she thought she was at a fashion event, not realizing what she was walking into. She didn't even talk. Just smiled and followed that British lady everywhere. And here's the kicker. That same chef claimed that after the party ended, there was an argument. A loud one. Between two staffers, one of whom said, she wasn't ready. They pushed her too soon. And now we've got footage we can't use. Let that line echo. Footage we can't use. What did they mean? Too obvious? Too recognizable? Too dangerous? Because if Meghan had become just another actress, maybe that video would have vanished forever. But once she became royal, once she became untouchable, that footage became gold. A nuclear weapon, held in a vault. Waiting for the right moment to be detonated. A glimpse behind the curtain. So what did Meghan know? Was she drugged? Deceived? Paid? Or did she suspect the truth? Some say she was lured under the guise of networking. That she thought she was being invited to a charity gala. That she was promised introductions to fashion brands and producers. And when she arrived, it was too late to turn back. Others say she knew more than she admitted. That she played the game. Carefully. Quietly. That her real skill wasn't acting, but navigating. Smiling. Enduring. Escaping. But here's the part no one talks about. What happens to someone after a night like that? Do they go home and cry? Do they rationalize? Do they forget? Or do they build a new version of themselves? One with armor? Because shortly after that summer, Meghan's life changed. She stopped attending certain events. She scrubbed old contacts. She moved to Toronto and began locking in steady TV work. Her blog, The TIG, launched a few years later, branding her as a conscious, woke, wellness-minded woman who drank green juice and quoted Rumi. But behind the meditation quotes and lifestyle posts was a wall made of secrets. Secrets like that party. And the night she may have realized she wasn't just a guest. She was a product, a party favor, and someone was filming. The whispered confession. In 2020, a former friend of Meghan's, who had long fallen out with her, made a cryptic comment in a podcast interview. She said, "There are things Meg has never talked about, nights she wishes she could erase, but they made her who she is. They taught her how to survive." At the time, it didn't raise eyebrows. But now, it feels like a veiled reference to that night. Because when you connect the dots, Meghan's sudden withdrawal from certain Hollywood circles, her abrupt shift toward humanitarian branding, her deep alliance with elite gatekeepers, it begins to look less like evolution and more like evasion. Not growth. Survival. And if that party was her turning point, if that was the night she realized what kind of game she was in, then we have to ask, who helped her get out? Because no one escapes Epstein's world without help, without protection, without making a deal. And Meghan? She didn't just survive. She thrived. She climbed, all the way to the crown. So who was holding the ladder? And what did she promise in return? Because the footage is out. The party is exposed. But the story? It's just beginning. Because next comes the most haunting part of all. The confession. Whispered. Recorded. Buried for years. Until now. What if the most powerful sentence Meghan Markle has ever uttered wasn't on Oprah? What if it didn't come with a Netflix crew, a studio audience, or a pearl-draped lighting setup? What if it was whispered, not performed? And what if those three haunting words, "They used me," were never meant to be heard? Not by Harry, not by the palace, not by you. But now, they've surfaced. And suddenly, the entire story twists into something far darker. Let's rewind. It was late 2020. The world was still reeling from the pandemic. Meghan and Harry had just inked a massive deal with Spotify. They were still fresh off their seismic royal exit, what the press had dubbed Megxit. They had fled the monarchy, fled the tabloids, fled the surveillance. Or so they thought. But while their Montecito compound offered gated luxury, it couldn't protect them from the past. Because somewhere, on a burner phone long thought destroyed, in a deleted WhatsApp folder, on a server no one was supposed to trace, a voice note lived. A confession, allegedly Meghan's voice. No intro, no fluff, just this. "They used me. I didn't know what it was. Not really. Not then. They said it was a party. That I was lucky to be invited. They told me to smile. That I looked stunning. That everyone wanted to meet me. And when I asked why me, they said, because you're perfect." I thought that meant something else. But it didn't. I was just a favor. The voice breaks. Breath hitches. Then, silence. Not the staged kind. Not the dramatic pause. The real kind. The kind that says, if I keep talking, I'll break. It's raw. Unfiltered. Not crafted for PR or streaming. And it changes everything. The leak. According to a whistleblower, an anonymous source claiming to be a former digital assistant subcontracted by a crisis PR firm. This voice note was part of an encrypted archive titled M__circle. It was categorized under contingency assets. In other words, insurance. Something to be used in an emergency. To protect Meghan? Or to control her? That's the question. Because this voice memo was allegedly recorded in 2015, a full year before she met Prince Harry. That timing matters. It means Meghan wasn't speaking after the fallout. She wasn't trying to justify anything to Harry or the public. She was purging. Alone, possibly scared, and possibly realizing, for the first time, that her past wasn't something she could outrun. It was something she was still trapped in. Decoded. Let's analyze the recording. They used me. This isn't ambiguous. It's an admission, not of guilt, but of being handled. Exploited. I didn't know what it was. Not really. She's distancing herself from awareness. Not denial. Not dishonesty. But naivete. They told me to smile. This echoes survivor testimonies from multiple Epstein events. Young women were told to smile, pose, be polite, perform. When I asked why me, they said because you're perfect. This line is both chilling and crucial. It speaks to selection. Meghan wasn't random. She was picked. And here's the darkest part. She believed them. She thought she was being recognized, rewarded, valued. But instead, she was being packaged. Just another accessory for billionaires in white jackets and offshore bank accounts. But why record it? Why would Meghan, so image-conscious, so careful, leave a voice trail like this? Sources speculate she was confiding in someone. A friend, a former handler, a therapist, or maybe just herself. Sometimes the only way to confront trauma is to speak it aloud. To hear your own voice tell the truth you've tried to bury. And Meghan? She's been running from that truth for years. This recording may have been her first attempt to stop. The trigger. So what made her say it? What event cracked her enough to hit record? We trace it to early 2015. One theory. She had just received a message. Not from the press. Not from a friend. But from someone tied to her past. Someone who reminded her, gently or not, that they still had the tape. The footage. The party. The favor. And maybe the threat. If you ever make it big, we'll remind the world who you really were. And in that moment, Meghan may have realized she wasn't in control. Not really. Not yet. So she recorded the voice note. A time capsule of pain. A breadcrumb. Proof. The retrieval. How did it leak? If you believe the whistleblower, the voice file was hidden inside a corrupted backup drive salvaged during a digital sweep after the Spotify deal was signed. Meghan's new team was cleaning up loose ends. One tech assistant was told to scrub all 2015 files, emails, voice memos, social folders. He found the archive, listened, and panicked. Then he leaked it. But not to TMZ. To lawyers. Specifically, the legal team handling the Epstein-Maxwell civil cases. The file was quietly logged. Not released. Not commented on. But labeled. Labeled under. Possible witness statement. Markle, Meghan. And just like that, she became more than a duchess. She became a potential witness. To what? A network. A system. A night. Reaction from the palace. When the legal note surfaced in late 2022, palace insiders reportedly held a private security meeting. Not for Harry. Not for Archie or Lilibet. For Meghan. According to a former royal staffer, speaking under the condition of anonymity, an internal memo circulated warning. If she is named as a witness, or worse, if she's labeled a victim, the monarchy's relationship to Epstein circles will need complete reassessment. Damage control will be insufficient. Think about that. If she's a victim, the monarchy panics. Not because they care, because it pulls them back into a scandal they've been desperate to bury since the Andrew debacle. And the voice note? That's a ticking bomb. Because it doesn't just indict Epstein's network. It implicates everyone who knew. Everyone who said nothing. Everyone who watched Meghan climb, knowing what she carried. The emotional fallout. Imagine being Meghan. Imagine looking in the mirror every morning. Knowing that somewhere, someone is holding on to a version of you that you've worked your whole life to erase. Not because you're guilty, but because you were used. Because you smiled when you were scared. Because you walked into a trap and made it look effortless. Because someone told you you were perfect. And you believed them. That voice memo isn't just a confession. It's a scream. It's a woman realizing, possibly for the first time, that her silence wasn't survival. It was complicity. And now, she wants out. But is it too late? Because here's the brutal truth. Once the footage is out, once the voice note is out, once your name is in the black book, you don't get to control the narrative anymore. And Meghan? She's been trying to control it for years. Through interviews, documentaries, brand deals. But this is the one story she didn't write. The one memory she couldn't scrub. The one tape she couldn't spin. And now, the world is listening. Because if Meghan Markle really said, "They used me, and I didn't know what it was," then she's not just a controversial public figure. She's a mirror, reflecting how power silences pain, how performance hides trauma, and how royalty doesn't erase abuse, it only polishes it. But the question still remains. If she was used, then who helped her escape? And who, right now, is working overtime to make sure she never speaks again? Because someone out there is terrified of what Meghan might say next. And in the next chapter, we follow that fear, all the way to the gates of Buckingham Palace, where the royals have built a panic room just for this. What if marrying into the British royal family wasn't the escape hatch? What if it was the trap? Or worse, what if it was both? Because by the time Meghan Markle stood at the altar in St. George's Chapel in 2018, dressed in Givenchy and watched by 2 billion people, she was no longer the same woman who whispered, "They used me." She was something else entirely. Untouchable, untraceable, unquestionable. But behind the tiara and royal protocols, there was a growing sense. Whispered in private corners of palaces, murmured among aides, and hinted at in MI5 files, that Meghan hadn't just fallen into royalty by accident. She had been moved, hidden in plain sight. And the real story of her royal wedding was the story of a getaway, a royal escape plan. Let's break it wide open. The perfect match myth. From the outside, Meghan and Harry's courtship looked like a modern fairy tale, a transatlantic romance, a blind date set up by a friend, fireworks in Botswana, engagement in the kitchen over roast chicken. But when you zoom in, the timeline starts to glitch. Who introduced them? Why was Marcus Anderson, Meghan's mysterious Soho House insider, so involved in orchestrating the match? And why did Meghan, of all people, get access to Harry's inner circle almost overnight, bypassing the usual layers of royal scrutiny? This wasn't just dating. It was placement, a calculated realignment of power. Because Meghan wasn't just escaping Hollywood when she joined the royal family. She was being extracted. The quiet intervention. According to intelligence insiders, rumors swirled in early 2016 that Meghan had become a sensitive asset. Not to MI5, to someone else. Not a spy, not an informant. A risk. Because certain figures, linked to Epstein's network, were reportedly growing anxious about Meghan's rising public profile. She was getting too visible, too powerful, too vocal, and worst of all, too close to going off script. So, a proposal was floated, quietly, through intermediaries. Get her protected, get her behind walls, get her somewhere she can't talk, where she won't talk. And what better shield than the crown? Harry, the key to the lock. Enter Prince Harry, grieving, isolated, disillusioned with royal life, still tormented by the paparazzi's role in his mother's death. He was a perfect target, charming, emotional, vulnerable. And Meghan? She was exactly the type of woman he'd fall for. Confident, empathetic, anti-establishment, beautiful. Their chemistry wasn't just real. It was inevitable. And when they met, things moved fast, unnaturally fast. Within months, Meghan was introduced to Charles. Within a year, the engagement was announced. And the palace? Instead of pushing back, as they did with countless other royal relationships, they leaned in. Hard. Royal protocols were waived. Security was assigned. The Queen approved the match at record speed. Why? Some say it was progressive optics. Others say it was something else. Because buried deep inside the palace archives is a confidential advisory labeled "Subject carries previous associations requiring legal compartmentalization. Recommend containment via formal status." Formal status? As in royal. Containment or protection? So which was it? Was the royal family trying to protect Meghan? Or were they trying to contain her? The truth may be both. By marrying her into the firm, they gained legal leverage. NDAs, security protocols, discretion contracts, press suppression. And by tying her to Harry, they ensured silence. Because now, speaking out wouldn't just damage Meghan. It would blow up the monarchy, the legacy, the lineage, everything. So Meghan stayed quiet, even as the tabloids turned on her, even as the staff revolted, even as old skeletons began rattling their way toward the surface, because her past was no longer hers. It was theirs. The signs of stress. Look back at the footage. Meghan's first royal walkabout, her first Buckingham reception, her first Commonwealth Day. Her hands twitch, her eyes flicker. She's scanning, not for fans, for threats. This isn't paranoia. It's survival. And behind closed doors, the walls were closing in. According to multiple sources, including a former Kensington Palace communications officer, Meghan began raising concerns just months after the wedding. Not about staff, not about racism, about security. Specifically, she feared surveillance. Not from the media, from people tied to her past. She told one aide, reportedly, if they find out where I am, if they know I'm not protected anymore, they'll come back. That line raised alarms. A file was opened, not by the palace, by MI5. The agency began quietly monitoring communications linked to Epstein's remaining network. And what they found spooked everyone. The intercepted email. In late 2018, an encrypted email was flagged from an overseas domain, intended for a burner device registered in Los Angeles. The content? Short, cryptic. M is untouchable for now, but that doesn't mean forever. Still have the footage. Still have the leverage. Let me know if it's time. The recipient? Unknown. The sender? Later traced to a server used by someone formerly listed in Epstein's black book. The implication? The game wasn't over. They hadn't forgotten Meghan. They were waiting. Panic in the palace. After the interception, the Queen's private secretary called an emergency meeting. Present, Prince Charles, Prince William, Meghan, Harry, MI5 liaison, Royal Legal Counsel. The topic? Digital threats and legacy containment. Translation? What do we do if the footage comes out? Allegedly, Meghan sat in silence for most of the meeting, until she said, I told you, they still have it. That sentence changed everything. From that point on, the palace adopted a new strategy. Operation Quiet Fade. No more spotlight. No more glamour. Let her fade behind the curtain. Let her leave. The Megxit masterstroke. Fast forward to early 2020. Meghan and Harry announced they are stepping back as senior royals. The press spins it as selfish. The palace pretends it's mutual. But the inside sources? They tell a different story. Meghan wanted out, but not just from the monarchy. From surveillance. From being managed. From being watched. And Harry? He was all in. Not because he understood the full story, but because he loved her. He believed her. He saw her panic attacks. He heard the whispers. He wanted to protect her, just like he couldn't protect Diana. So they ran, first to Canada, then to California. And while the world mocked them, someone else panicked. Because the minute Meghan left royal jurisdiction, she became public again, vulnerable, exposed. And the footage? It started surfacing. The escape within the escape. But even in Montecito, they're not safe. That's why their mansion is fortress grade. That's why their staff signs triple-tier NDAs. That's why Meghan avoids public appearances without vetted venues. Because she knows. She knows. They're still watching. They're still waiting. And if she slips, if she speaks, if the full story comes out, it won't just destroy Meghan. It'll take down titans, bankers, Hollywood giants, maybe even heads of state. Because Meghan's secret is a door, and on the other side is everything the world wasn't supposed to see. But the clock is ticking. The footage is out. The voice note is out. The Black Book connection is public. And Meghan? She's no longer in the castle. She's on her own. So what happens if she stops running? What happens if she fights back? What if Meghan Markle decides to detonate the story herself? To step out from behind the curtain? And tell the world what really happened on that island? On that yacht? At that party? If that happens, then the royal family's escape plan becomes a failure. And Meghan becomes the most dangerous woman in the world. But before we go there, we need to understand why Buckingham Palace panicked the moment her name came up. Because behind those gates, they had a contingency of their own. And it started with something known only as the panic room. What do you do when a scandal you buried is suddenly clawing its way back into the light? If you're Buckingham Palace, you don't scramble. You don't panic publicly. You activate the room. Because deep inside the royal machine, beneath the velvet, behind the portraits, past the corridors tourists never see, there's a system, a response mechanism, not for wars, not for coronations, but for containment. And when Meghan Markle's name surfaced in connection with Epstein, that system kicked into overdrive. Welcome to what insiders now call the panic room. It's not a metaphor. We're not talking about a literal steel vault or a bunker. This is worse. The panic room is a code name for a crisis control operation, first designed in the early 1990s after Prince Charles and Diana's divorce rocked the monarchy. It was updated in 2005 after Prince Andrew began receiving scrutiny for his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. And by 2018, it had Meghan's name on it. Literally, classified documents, leaked by a former royal staffer, confirmed that subject had a 17-page risk assessment dossier tied to her integration into the royal household. The title? Historical Vulnerabilities and Predictive Liability Matrix. Let that sink in. Before she ever became a duchess, the palace already saw her as a liability. So when the Epstein footage started surfacing, they didn't react like civilians. They flipped the switch and activated the panic plan. The first step, silence and scrub. The first rule of a royal scandal? Erasure. Within 24 hours of the Reddit footage leak, palace tech teams began issuing quiet legal notices to media outlets, flagging the clip as potentially manipulated and in breach of copyright. What copyright? No one knows. But the point wasn't to prove ownership. It was to create uncertainty. See doubt. By time. Simultaneously, MI5 began scrubbing search results tied to Meghan Markle Epstein Island. Markle Party Footage, 2007. Markle Black Book Entry. Redirections were implemented. Autocomplete was rerouted. Social media hashtags were buried with algorithm noise. You may have noticed it. One day, it was everywhere. The next, nothing. Just noise. Just chaos. But it wasn't by chance. It was the room. The second step, internal interrogation. While the public was being gaslit into forgetting, the palace turned inward. Key staff, both past and present, were quietly summoned. Not questioned in conference rooms. In secure suites. Phones confiscated. Conversations recorded. They weren't just asking, "Did you know about the footage?" They were asking, "Did you know where she came from?" Some staffers cracked. One reportedly said, "We suspected there was something buried. She was too polished. Too prepared. Not like the others." Another reportedly broke down in tears, whispering, "I saw the warning. I saw the file. But they told us to treat her like a unicorn." Unicorn. A rare, magical creature. Or, depending on context, a myth made real for strategic purposes. That was Meghan to them. A tool. A symbol. A liability dressed as royalty. The third step, diplomatic firewall. Once the internal risk was contained, the next step? Shield the monarchy. Because the scandal wasn't just about Meghan. It was about access. How did someone allegedly linked to Epstein end up living in Kensington Palace? Sleeping under royal security? Shaking hands with heads of state? To prevent fallout, the panic room team deployed diplomatic contacts. Discreet calls were made to embassies. Media liaisons were warned. Publishing speculative content regarding Duchess Markle's alleged connections to Epstein may result in denial of future palace access. In plain English, keep quiet or be cut off. The press complied. Mostly. A few outlets in Eastern Europe and Latin America ran pieces. Fringe podcasts speculated wildly. But the major players? BBC, Times, Telegraph, Guardian. Silent. Too silent. Not because there was nothing to report, but because they'd been told not to look. The fourth step, isolate and smother. With public chatter silenced and internal staff warned, the next tactic was to smother Meghan with kindness. It sounds backward, right? But here's the strategy. If you can't control the threat, absorb it. Make Meghan too busy, too pampered, too distracted to rebel. So she was flooded with press opportunities, branded with causes, given every microphone she asked for, as long as she stayed on script. Remember the surge in woke Duchess headlines? The cookbook project? The Vogue guest editorship? It wasn't organic. It was orchestration. Give the public a new Meghan, so they forget the one in the footage. But Meghan? She wasn't fooled. In private, she reportedly told a friend, "They're managing me, like I'm a campaign." Because she was. The fifth step. Secure the exit. Despite the palace's containment strategy, Meghan eventually buckled. She began to spiral. Insiders say she lost weight. She fought with staff. She isolated herself. The voice memo you heard in Chapter 5? It was recorded during this time. And once it existed,